I thought I knew my family until I discovered they'd been stealing from me for 23 years. What started as a simple phone call about my grandmother's will turned into the most devastating betrayal of my life, and by the end of this story, you'll understand why I walked away from a seven-figure inheritance just to expose the truth. My name is Sarah, and I'm 38 years old. For most of my adult life, I'd been the family disappointment. While my older brother Marcus became a corporate lawyer and my sister Jessica married into old Boston money, I chose to become a pediatric nurse. Not exactly the career path that impresses at country club dinners, if you know what I mean. I live in a modest two-bedroom apartment in Somerville, drive a 10-year-old Honda Civic, and my idea of a luxury vacation is a long weekend at Cape Cod. My family never let me forget how ordinary I was compared to them. Every Christmas dinner, every birthday celebration, every family gathering was a subtle reminder that I was the one who settled for less. But here's what they didn't know about their disappointment of a daughter and sister. Here's what nobody knew. I had been quietly investing every spare dollar I earned since I was 22 years old. Not in flashy stocks or cryptocurrency like Marcus always bragged about. I invested in boring, steady things. Index funds. Real estate investment trusts. Municipal bonds. The kind of investments my late grandfather taught me about during our Sunday afternoon walks when I was just a kid. Grandpa Joe was different from the rest of the family. He didn't care about status or appearances. He cared about substance. Sarah, he used to tell me, wealth isn't about what you show the world. It's about what you build when nobody's watching. He died when I was 16, but his lessons stuck with me like nothing else ever has. By the time this story begins, I had quietly accumulated just over $1.2 million in investments. Not bad for a nurse who supposedly had no ambition, right? But I never told anyone. Not my parents, not my siblings, not even my closest friends. I lived below my means, saved aggressively, and let my family think I was struggling financially while they lived their expensive, leveraged lifestyles. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was just finishing my night shift at Boston Children's Hospital when my phone buzzed. It was my mother, Catherine, and she sounded different. Excited in a way I hadn't heard in years. Sarah, honey, you need to come to the house this weekend. We're having a family meeting about Grandmother Eleanor's estate. Grandmother Eleanor had passed away 6 months earlier at 94. She was my father's mother, and honestly, we weren't close. She was one of those old-money Boston matriarchs who spoke in clipped tones and seemed to measure everyone's worth by their bank account and social connections. I always assumed she barely tolerated me. What kind of meeting? I asked, already feeling that familiar knot in my stomach that came with any family gathering. Well, the will reading, of course. The lawyers need all the beneficiaries present. Beneficiaries. That was unexpected. I figured whatever Grandmother Eleanor left behind would go to my parents, with maybe small gifts to Marcus and Jessica. I never imagined I'd be included in anything significant. I'll be there, I said, though part of me wondered if this was worth taking time off work. That Saturday, I drove my little Honda up the circular driveway of my parents' Beacon Hill mansion. The house always made me feel small. For stories of red brick and ivy, with windows that looked down on the city like judgmental eyes. I could see Marcus's BMW and Jessica's Mercedes already parked near the entrance. Of course they'd arrived early to strategize. I found everyone gathered in the formal living room, the one with the portraits of stern-faced ancestors staring down from the walls. My parents sat together on the antique sofa, Marcus was checking his phone in the leather armchair, and Jessica was examining her manicure by the window. The family lawyer, Mr. Henley, sat at the mahogany table with papers spread before him. There she is, my father said as I entered. Our little late bloomer. The phrase stung, as it always did. I was 38 years old, owned my own home, had a stable career helping sick children, and had built a substantial nest egg through careful planning. But to him, I was still the child who disappointed them by choosing nursing over law or business. Mr. Henley cleared his throat. Now that everyone's here, we can begin. Eleanor's will is quite specific about her intentions. He began reading in that dry, legal tone lawyer's perfect. Most of it was standard stuff. Small donations to charities, personal items to various family members, some money to longtime household staff. Then he got to the main bequests. To my son Robert and his wife Catherine, I leave the sum of $50,000 each, along with my gratitude for their years of attention and care. I saw my parents exchange glances. $100,000 total wasn't nothing, but it wasn't the windfall they'd clearly expected. To my grandson Marcus Robert, I leave the sum of $75,000, with hopes that he will use it wisely rather than flashily. Marcus looked up from his phone, frowning slightly. $75,000 was decent, but again, probably less than he'd anticipated. To my granddaughter Jessica Marie, I leave my jewelry collection and the sum of $75,000, trusting she will appreciate both the monetary and sentimental value. Jessica actually smiled at that. Grandmother Eleanor's jewelry was worth at least another $50,000, maybe more. Then Mr. Henley paused, looking directly at me. To my granddaughter Sarah Elizabeth, who has shown the wisdom to live below her means and the character to find purpose in service to others, I leave the remainder of my estate. This includes my house in Nantucket, my investment portfolio, and all remaining liquid assets, totaling approximately $2.3 million. The silence in the room was deafening. I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. $2.3 million. Plus a house in Nantucket that I knew was worth at least another $800,000. Nearly $3.1 million total. I'm sorry, Marcus said, his voice tight. There must be some mistake. Mr. Henley consulted his papers. No mistake. Mrs. Eleanor was quite clear. She spent considerable time explaining her reasoning. She felt that Sarah was the only family member who truly understood the value of money and the importance of character over appearance. My mother's face had gone pale. But Sarah doesn't even. I mean, she can barely manage her own finances. She drives that terrible little car and lives in that tiny apartment. Because she chooses to, Mr. Henley said simply. According to Eleanor's notes, she had been observing all of you for years. She was particularly impressed by Sarah's decision to pursue meaningful work over lucrative work, and her apparent ability to live within her means while others. He glanced around the room. Well, she had concerns about the financial management skills of other family members. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Jessica found her voice first. This is ridiculous. Sarah doesn't know anything about managing that kind of money. She'll lose it all within a year. Actually, I said quietly, I think I'll be fine. But nobody was listening to me. They were too busy being outraged. My father stood up, pacing to the window. There has to be a way to contest this. Eleanor was 94, her judgment was clearly compromised. I can assure you her judgment was sound, Mr. Henley interrupted. I spent several hours with her discussing this will. She was sharp as ever, and she had very specific reasons for her decisions. What reasons? Marcus demanded. Mr. Henley flipped through his notes. She mentioned that Sarah was the only one who never asked her for money. The only one who didn't spend family gatherings talking about expensive purchases or complaining about financial pressures. She said, and I quote, Sarah reminds me of my late husband. She understands that true wealth is built quietly, over time, through discipline and purpose. My grandmother had been watching me. All those years when I felt invisible at family gatherings, when I felt like the boring disappointment, she had been paying attention. She saw something in me that even I didn't fully recognize. But my family, they were just getting started. This is insane, Jessica said, her voice rising. Sarah works at a hospital. She makes, what, $60,000 a year? She has no idea how to handle investments or property management or tax implications. She'll need help. I'll help her, Marcus said immediately. I can manage the portfolio, make sure she doesn't make any costly mistakes. We could set up a trust. With you as the trustee, I suppose? I asked. Well, yes. I mean, that makes sense, doesn't it? I have experience with large-scale financial management. I looked around the room at my family. My parents nodding along with Marcus's suggestion. Jessica already calculating how she could benefit from Marcus managing my money. Mr. Henley watching this display with barely concealed distaste. No, I said simply. No? My mother sounded genuinely confused. No, I don't need help managing the money. I don't need a trust. I don't need Marcus to make decisions for me. Sarah, be reasonable, my father said in that condescending tone I'd heard my entire life. This is a lot of responsibility. You're used to living paycheck to paycheck. Actually, I'm not. The words came out before I could stop them. Everyone turned to look at me. What do you mean? My mother asked. I took a deep breath. This wasn't how I'd planned to tell them, but here we were. I mean, I'm not living paycheck to paycheck. I haven't been for years. Sarah, there's no shame in struggling financially, Jessica said in that fake sweet voice she used when she was being patronizing. We all know nursing doesn't pay much. I have $1.2 million in investments. You could have heard a pin drop. I'm sorry, what? Marcus said. I said I have $1.2 million. In various investment accounts. I've been building it since I was 22. My mother actually laughed. Sarah, honey, that's impossible. You live in that little apartment, you drive that old car. Because I choose to. Because I learned from Grandpa Joe that wealth isn't about what you display, it's about what you build. Every dollar I didn't spend on a fancy car or a bigger apartment went into investments. Every raise I got, every bonus, every gift of money over the years, it all went into building my portfolio. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. Finally, my father spoke. You're lying. No, I'm not. Prove it, Marcus said, pulling out his phone. Show us your account statements. I pulled out my own phone and opened my investment app. I turned the screen toward them, showing my total portfolio value, $1,247,883. Marcus grabbed the phone from my hands, staring at the screen. This has to be fake. You can fake these apps. Call Fidelity, I said calmly. Ask them to verify the accounts under my name and social security number. Jessica was shaking her head. This doesn't make sense. If you had all this money, why didn't you ever tell us? Because of this, I said, gesturing around the room. Because I knew that the moment you found out I had money, everything would change. You'd start seeing me differently. You'd start wanting things from me. That's not fair, my mother said, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Marcus, how many times have you complained to me about your student loans? Jessica, remember last Christmas when you mentioned how expensive private school is for the kids? Dad, what about that time you said it was too bad I couldn't help out more with Mom's medical bills? They all looked uncomfortable now. I listened to all of it, I continued. I watched you struggle with your expensive lifestyles, your high mortgages, your credit card debt, your leveraged investments. And I said nothing because I knew that if you realized I had money, you'd expect me to bail you out. You'd expect me to be the family ATM. You let us struggle when you could have helped, Jessica said, and there was real anger in her voice now. I let you make your own choices. Just like you let me make mine. This is different, Marcus said. We're family. Funny how family matters now that you know I have money. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Mr. Henley cleared his throat. Perhaps this is a conversation better had privately. I need to discuss some legal matters with Sarah about the inheritance. No, my father said firmly. We're not done here. Sarah, if you've had this money all along, then you clearly don't need Eleanor's inheritance. The fair thing would be to divide it among the rest of us. I stared at him. The fair thing? Yes. You've been deceiving us for years. You've been living a lie while watching us struggle. The least you can do is share Eleanor's bequest with the people who actually need it. The people who need it, I repeated slowly. That's right, Jessica chimed in. Marcus and I both have children to think about. College tuition, mortgages, real expenses. You're single, you don't have kids, you don't need that kind of money. I looked around the room one more time. At my parents, who had spent my entire adult life making me feel like a failure. At my siblings, who had never shown any interest in my life until they learned I had something they wanted. At Mr. Henley, who was watching this family implosion with the weary expression of someone who'd seen it all before. You're right, I said finally. I don't need the money. Relief flooded their faces. So I'm going to give it all away. The relief vanished instantly. What? My mother gasped. I'm going to donate every penny of Grandmother Eleanor's inheritance to charity. The Boston Children's Hospital Foundation, specifically. You can't do that, Marcus said, jumping to his feet. Actually, I can. Mr. Henley, is there anything preventing me from donating the inheritance? Nothing at all, he said, and I could swear I saw him trying not to smile. It's entirely your decision how to use the bequest. Sarah, don't be ridiculous, my father said. You're upset, I understand that, but this is not the time to make rash decisions. I'm not upset, I said, standing up. I'm disappointed. But not surprised. This is exactly what I expected would happen. Then why did you tell us about your money? Jessica demanded. Because I wanted to see what you'd do with the information. I wanted to see if you'd be happy for me, or proud that I'd managed to build something substantial through discipline and hard work. Instead, you immediately started trying to figure out how to get your hands on it. We're your family, my mother said, tears in her eyes now. Family helps family. You're right. Family does help family. Do you know how many extra shifts I've worked over the years? How many times I've stayed late to help with difficult cases? How many children I've comforted through scary procedures? I've been helping people every single day for 16 years. That's my contribution to the world. I turned to Mr. Henley. Can you draw up the paperwork for the donation? Of course. I'll need a few days to prepare everything properly. Perfect. I headed toward the door, then stopped and turned back. Oh, and just so we're clear. I won't be attending any more family gatherings. I won't be available for holiday dinners or birthday celebrations or graduation parties. I'm done pretending we're a close, loving family when we're clearly not. Sarah, wait, my mother called out, but I was already walking away. I made it to my car before the tears started. Not tears of sadness, exactly. Tears of relief. After 38 years, I finally understood where I stood with my family. And surprisingly, it felt liberating. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop in Somerville when my phone rang. It was Mr. Henley. Sarah, I have some interesting news about your grandmother's estate. Oh? It seems there was additional documentation that came to light during the probate process. Eleanor had been keeping detailed records of family interactions for several years. Notes about conversations, observations about character and behavior. She also had some specific instructions that only become relevant if certain conditions were met. What kind of conditions? If any beneficiary attempted to pressure you into sharing your inheritance, or if family members showed what she termed predatory behavior toward your bequest, she wanted you to know something. I waited. Your inheritance includes a sealed letter addressed to you personally. Eleanor left instructions that it should only be opened if the family reacted poorly to the will reading. I think it's time you read it. 2 days later, I sat in my apartment holding an envelope in my grandmother's elegant handwriting. For Sarah, if they prove me right. Inside was a letter written in her careful script. My dear Sarah. If you're reading this, it means your family has shown their true colors regarding your inheritance. I am sorry, but not surprised. I have been watching all of you for many years, and you are the only one who reminds me of my late husband, your grandfather Joseph. He would have been so proud of the woman you've become. I know about your investments, dear. I've known for quite some time. My financial advisor mentioned seeing your name on some of the same fund prospectuses I receive. When I inquired, he was ethically bound not to share details, but he did say that you were one of his most disciplined young investors. That told me everything I needed to know. Your parents and siblings have spent years living beyond their means, borrowing against their futures, prioritizing appearance over substance. They have made their choices, and now they must live with the consequences. You, however, have built something real. Something lasting. Something your grandfather would recognize and respect. Use my bequest wisely, or give it away entirely if that feels right to you. The money matters far less than the character required to handle it properly. You have that character. They do not. Be proud of who you are, Sarah. Be proud of the choices you've made. And don't let anyone make you feel small for living authentically. With love and respect, Grandmother Eleanor. P.S. The Nantucket house has been in our family for 60 years. If you decide to keep it, you'll find some interesting family history in the library. If you decide to sell it, know that your grandfather proposed to me in the garden behind the house. Either choice would honor his memory. I read the letter 3 times before the full impact hit me. She knew. She had known about my investments, about my careful financial planning, about the way my family treated me. She had been watching and evaluating all of us, and she had made her decision based on years of observation. I wasn't an afterthought in her will. I was the centerpiece. The next morning, I called Mr. Henley. I've changed my mind about the donation, I said. Oh? I'm going to keep the inheritance. All of it. That's wonderful, Sarah. I think Eleanor would be pleased. There's one more thing. I want to set up a trust fund for children's education. Not for my nieces and nephews specifically, but for kids who need help with school expenses. Children whose parents work in service industries, nursing, teaching, social work. People who chose meaning over money. I think that's a beautiful idea. And Mr. Henley? If my family contacts you asking about the estate or trying to find ways to contest the will, I understand completely. 6 months later, I was sitting on the porch of my grandmother's Nantucket house, watching the sunset over the water. The house was smaller than I'd expected, but perfectly maintained. The library Eleanor mentioned was filled with family photos and documents I'd never seen before. Pictures of my grandfather as a young man, letters between my grandparents, business records showing how they'd built their wealth slowly and carefully over decades. I kept my apartment in Somerville and my job at the hospital, but the Nantucket house became my sanctuary. A place where I could think and plan and remember that wealth isn't about what you show the world. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Sarah, we miss you at Sunday dinner. Can we talk? I looked at the message for a long time, then deleted it without responding. Some bridges, once burned, are meant to stay that way. I think about that afternoon in my parents' living room often. The moment when everything changed, when masks fell away and true intentions were revealed. My family saw my money as something that belonged to them by virtue of our shared DNA. They couldn't understand that I had built something through discipline and sacrifice, something that was mine alone. But you know what? Their reaction taught me something valuable. It showed me that the family I had built for myself, my colleagues at the hospital, my neighbors, my friends, they were the people who loved me for who I was, not what I had. They were the ones who celebrated my successes and supported me through challenges. Blood doesn't make you family. Love and respect make you family. I still work as a pediatric nurse. I still drive my Honda Civic, though I did finally replace it with a newer model. I still live modestly, but now I have the security of knowing that my future is secure. And every month, I transfer money to the Education Trust Fund, helping kids whose parents made the same choice I did, choosing purpose over profit. My grandmother was right about one thing. Character matters more than money. But having both, well, that's not a bad combination either. If you've made it this far, You probably have your own story about family and money and the complicated ways they intersect. Maybe you've been underestimated too. Maybe you've had people in your life who only saw your value in terms of what you could do for them. Here's what I learned: your worth isn't determined by other people's opinions. Your success isn't measured by their approval. And sometimes, the most liberating thing you can do is walk away from people who can't see your value. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one.